It says in the Bhagavad Gita, the essence is to act beautifully without attachment to the fruits of the actions. What it means is, you don't get to determine how it turns out, but you do get to plant your seeds of goodness. Says Jack Kornfield in episode 292 of the Heart Wisdom Podcast, Becoming What You Want the World to Be. This is a beautiful video episode featuring Ocean Robbins of the Food Revolution Network, who are all about being committed to educating, inspiring, and empowering on behalf of healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for all. What a beautiful mission. You can check them out at foodrevolution.org. So this episode, if you've been following along Heart Wisdom over the past 6 months or so, you will notice a through line of teachings that seems to be birthing through Jack in this time period. This is a podcast that focuses on how when we become what we want the world to be, rather than telling the world what we want it to be, the true revolution comes, and it comes from the inside out. When I was laying in bed this morning, thinking about this intro, the thought came to my mind in that kind of transient, lucid dream state, that your world doesn't happen to you, your world happens through you. And what the Bhagavad Gita invites us to do is to lay down our attachment to how we want the world to be and open ourselves in beauty to how we want to be in the world. Jack has often been using the quote from Snyder that if you want to save the world, don't do it out of guilt or shame, do it out of love. Jack shares, yes, we stand up for justice, but who are we when we stand up? And how beautiful and joyful can we be? In this episode, Jack shares a story of protesting, I believe with his daughter Caroline, who started the amazing Oasis Legal Services, a crucial nonprofit that empowers low-income LGBTQ immigrants who have survived violence and persecution due to their sexuality, gender identity. Well, they were at a protest, and I know the protests that I have been at quite often have been very angry, and it makes sense. There's a lot going on in the world that we could be angry about. But as Jack keeps pointing back to in this podcast, who are we when we stand up? Can we do it beautifully? Can we do it out of joy? And in that moment, a song started. Jack sings it in this podcast. Something like, no shame, no hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here. No hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here. And he says everyone started singing it. Even the officers who were there to make sure the protest didn't get out of hand, or kind of tapping along. And that right there, to me, is the true revolution. It bubbles up inwardly. It's not some heavy-handed expectation. If we're sitting there yelling and shaming the quote-unquote other side, it's going to push them away, and it's going to push them potentially against us. But when we do something beautifully with love and connection, it's almost undeniable and contagious, like Meher Baba said, that love is contagious. And through that contagion of sweetness and music and joy, why wouldn't, if you saw that going on, why wouldn't you at least want to open up to what is making those people so joyful. And that is the true power of doing it beautifully. And rather than telling the world angrily what you want it to be, truly becoming what you want the world to be. Because it doesn't happen to you. It happens through you. And that is what this wonderful podcast is about. My little bit of housekeeping this week is Jack's Discovering Your Buddha Nature course. This is a live cohort starting very soon, if you're listening chronologically. But the main course will always be available at jackkornfield.com. It is a modern take on Buddha's 10 paramitas, the 10 perfections, and is a true guide for us to live from the heart of our Buddha nature. Each of us has an inborn basic goodness, an inborn Buddha nature. And this course is Jack helping you uncover that. This is at jackkornfield.com, along with an array, a constant flowing stream of beautiful videos, articles, guided meditations. It's a treasure trove, and I do hope you dive in. Otherwise, please sit back, relax, whatever you do when you enjoy podcasts, because this is episode 292 of Heart Wisdom with Jack Kornfield and Ocean Robbins. Becoming what you want the world to be. May you be happy and healthy. May you be safe and protected. May you imagine and stand up for a better world. And may you do it beautifully and joyfully. Namaste.
I am curious, for those of us who identify as activists, who want to create as much positive change as we can in this world, who see the levels of suffering and violence and pain in the world and want to do something about it. How do we engage? How do we participate? How do we play our part fully without losing our essence? Like, how do you engage in the world, as maybe the old saying goes, without becoming of it?
Yeah. Well, it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the essence is to act beautifully without attachment to the fruits of the actions. And what it means is you don't get to determine how it turns out, but you do get to plant your seeds of goodness. And as Thoreau said, convince me you have a seed there, and I'm prepared to expect miracles. You get to plant the seeds, and eventually, in their own time, they bear fruit. That's not your job. Your job is to make a beautiful garden, to plant beautiful things, to tend them. Now, here's the thing with activists, because as someone who's been an activist myself at times, I've also taught retreats and had many burned out activists come and join us. Because if you work from that place of, I've got to save the world, it's an emergency, let me do everything I can, you take the suffering outside into your own body. And it's very hard to sustain. Trudy and I, my beloved and my wife and colleague in teaching, have been going to the Oslo Freedom Forum in Norway, which is a place where the Nobel Prize is granted every year. And the Oslo Freedom Forum doesn't bring just one great person to celebrate, but during the year, it brings 40 people, each of whom would be worthy of a Nobel Prize, to tell their stories, to educate the 1,000 people who come to support each other. And one of the things that we do, especially working with the younger activists, is to teach them practices so that they don't take the suffering outside into themselves. And an example, I think, of this extraordinary activist in Latin America who was working to save the rainforests and done amazing things and brought together 1 million students in one country to, protest and stand up for the trees and the animals and so forth. But what started to happen for her is that every time there were huge fires burning down parts of the Amazon, every time she heard about it, her menstrual period would start the next day because she was carrying the fire in herself. And so she needed practices, and there were a series of them. One practice was, because she was working with fire, was a water practice to sweep through her body and wash out all that was burning and send it back to the earth, to become like a tree herself and to feel the deep roots and how the earth could nourish her, to become spacious in time and feel biologic and geographic time, to give a perspective that forests renew and the earth renews herself, and to feel that rather than carrying it in her body, and let her body rest at peace while all the rest was happening. There was a series of practices to do a compassion practice. When that was the outer, or that was within her body, I also asked her to make an altar. I said, I don't know who or what you believe in or what brings you inspiration. It can be Pachamama. It can be the great shamans of the jungle. It can be Mahatma Gandhi, or it can be Lehman Gabowi, who is the president of Liberia, who said, Liberia used to be known for its child soldiers, and now it's known for its women leaders. She won the Nobel Prize. Or Wangari Maathai, who planted trees in Nigeria, got imprisoned like all these people. And her movement planted 51 million trees by the time she got her Nobel Prize. I said, feel them and put their images up, because you're not supposed to do this alone. You have a backup. You have 1,000 generations of stewards of the forest, of people who stood up. And if you take it all in yourself, that's hubris. That's ego in a way, even if it feels like it's good ego. And instead, feel yourself in the line of those who serve, but become what you want the world to be. Let the mind quiet and the heart open. And then feel what is the most effective response, where you and the peace and the change you want are the same. One more thing to add. A good friend and colleague of mine who died last year, Wes Nisker, went to visit Gary Snyder. Gary was one of our great environmentalists. He wrote Earth Household and got the Pulitzer Prize for his environmental and writing work 50 years ago. And said, Gary, you're in your 90s. What do you have to say to us? The oceans are rising, the species are getting lost, the deserts are getting fiercer, refugees are moving, the atmosphere is changing. And he looked back and he said, don't feel guilty. If you want to change it, if you want to save it, don't do it out of guilt. Don't do it out of fear. Don't do it out of anger. Those are the very forces that have made these human cause problems. Our anger and our fear and our greed, our guilt. So simply, he said, if you want to save it because you love it. It's the only force that's big enough for humans to really make a difference. It's like the force that lets mothers lift cars off their children. And so you quiet the mind. You make your altar. You say, I'm in line, thank you, to whoever is on there, Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and sojourner truth, and you say, help me do this with a peaceful heart. Help me do this out of the courage of love. When Martin Luther King stood up, you could feel that. And that becomes the invitation to your nobility, that you're present, you're not afraid of what's happening, and you're not afraid of your emotions. There's fear and grief and all that, you honor them. If I were to go to talk to the Dalai Lama now about this election, and I have the privilege of speaking to him on occasion over the years, what should we do with all this? I think the first thing he would do would be to weep a little. His eyes would fill with tears because he's so compassionate. And he said, yes, there might be more suffering. It's just the truth of it. And then he would smile as well. He might even laugh, as he does, as he and Tutu did in that book on joy. And he would say, yes, there's suffering. Me too. So much suffering. So then you'd feel him really with you. And then he would smile and he'd say, yes, but also must have joy. We must have joy. And so both of those are true, or you can get caught in taking the fires inside and the loss inside.
I'm remembering a passage from the prophet about how the deeper sorrow is carved into the canyon of your heart, the more love it can contain. And I'm reflecting on how, in some ways, the binary mind can think as if joy and happiness and all good emotions are over here, and pain and fear and suffering, or all bad emotions are over here, and we're trying to get to more joy and less pain. And yet there is some way in which the totality of everything is part of living fully and loving fully. And we cannot open our hearts fully to creation without also opening our hearts fully to destruction and to death, because it's all part of it. So I'm just breathing into that, and with such gratitude, Jack, for your lifetime of inviting us to discover our capacity to witness and be with what is. And it strikes me also that part of what is our desire to change what is, our capacity to act and to take action, that is real, that is part of truth. And for those of us who feel a place inside that says, no, I want to do something to make this world better, I don't want to just breathe and accept the status quo. Well, here's the thing, like, the capacity to act, the capacity to engage, the capacity to love and contribute and put love into action is also part of what is so, and part of what we get to embrace when we're present. My dad used to quote, as I was growing up, Nietzsche saying, or paraphrase Nietzsche saying, "She who will, the fates lead. She who won't, they drag." And it sometimes seems as if we have a calling or a purpose or a direction, and we're going to end up there one way or the other, but we either make it more painful or less painful, partly depending on our willingness. What is your sense of how to attune to, if we have a sense of purpose or calling in our lives, what is that? And what's the difference between that and the expectations, the assumptions that we may have inherited or picked up that aren't really attuned to our essence?
Well, whether it's an activism, and we do need to act, and we act all the time, but we can act with a bigger vision and with greater import when we're really connected with our heart and with what Gary Snyder said, with what we love. Save it because you love it. But neither meditation nor activism has to be a grim duty. Okay, I work out at the gym and I have a good diet and I, go to therapy and now I better meditate and fix myself. It's not that. It's really an invitation to open the heart and be present for everything that you said, Ocean, for the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. And in activism, you stand up because you care, because you love, and then you bring your best to it. Molly Ivins, a great activist and author and so forth in Texas, she said, Keep on fighting for freedom and justice, beloveds, but don't forget to have fun doing it. How's that? And I tell you a couple of stories. I want to read you a tough poem and then tell a story. And this is one of the most brilliant poems of the last decade or two by Jack Gilbert, who died a couple of years ago. And it's tough. It's called A Brief for the Defense. Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they're starving somewhere else with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives because that's also what the gods want. Otherwise, the mornings before lavender summer dawn would not be made so fine, and the Bengal tiger would not be fashioned orange and black so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they've known and the awfulness in their future, even while somebody in the village is very sick. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure seeking, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world, to make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. And those are powerful lines. If we deny our happiness, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. And when you go into refugee camps, they don't want you to come in depressed and overwhelmed and frightened. It does not help. So some years ago, my daughter and a group of young lawyers, she started Oasis Legal Services, which is a wonderful nonprofit that works to save the lives of refugees from around the world, in particular LGBTQ who've been tortured or imprisoned or all kinds of things. And at the beginning of the first Donald Trump presidency, you may recall, there were those executive actions to prevent people from 7 Muslim majority countries coming into the US and shut our doors and all that. And so there are all these people actually sort of half imprisoned in limbo in our airports. And she and a bunch of other hotshot lawyers from Berkeley that she works with went down to the airport. I went with them. And there were 1,000 people demonstrating or more. After all, it's the Bay Area, right? We have to be welcoming people. And they were by the gates. There were several gates, of international gates, where people could come in. And they were doing what the activists usually do. They had their signs, no ban, no fear, refugees welcome here, and, chanting and doing the things, right? In big crowds. And so we were at one gate. There were like 400 people chanting, no ban, no fear, their signs. And it was kind of aggressive, as activists like to be. And on the side, there was a New Orleans jazz band that had come down. And as people were chanting, no ban, no fear, refugees are welcome here, the drummer picked up the beat a little and put a little, drum beat behind it. And then the trumpet player put a little riff on top. And then we were chanting, and then the sax player came in and played a melody along with it. And pretty soon the band moved toward the center, and everyone was chanting, no ban, no fear, refugees are welcome here. But it turned into music, and everyone was dancing, no ban, no fear, refugees welcome here. It changed the entire feeling of it. Even the guards, the the immigration, they were all smiling. We were there at the gate. We were not going to go away. We were going to stay there till these people were taken care of. But we were singing and dancing. And it was beautiful.
Mm.
And it speaks to your question. Yes, we stand up for justice. But who are we when we stand up? And how beautiful can we be? Can we be like Nelson Mandela showed us? Can we be that spirit?
Janie said that may be the most beautiful activism story I've ever heard. We heard from Dawn, who said, "This is the most exquisite yet tangible help I have received of late. I know I will take this into my personal practice and into my life. The duality of suffering and joy. Mandela, Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, Khalil Gibran, so many teachers and so much wisdom. Thank you, Ocean and Jack, and all who are open to engaging in the most elegant ways, with gratitude for it all." Many other people are also writing in, and just to respond to a few of the questions that have been shared. Actually, Brigitte said, "Not a question, just wanted to say what an honor it is to be in your presence, Jack. Thank you for arranging this experience, Ocean." Brigitte, thank you for being here with us.
So here's Howard Zinn, the people's history of the United States. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history, especially in difficult times, will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, if we imagine only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and the possibility of sending the spinning top of the world in a benevolent direction. So we're putting together the energy of love and the capacity to act.
That's so powerful. Helen, and you feel like you're answering her question already. She said, "I find it really hard to feel and embrace joy when I know how many children, animals, and people are suffering and hurting. How can we reconcile this within our consciousness?" And I think you're touching on that, but is there anything more you would say?
Well, first, I really want to take Helen's question seriously. And like that image I said of talking with the Dalai Lama, my eyes could fill with tears. There are so many hungry children, and it's crazy because we have grain elevators full of food in some countries and starving children elsewhere, and how can we not care? We human beings. The equation is the more greed, the more hatred, the more ignorance, the more suffering. This is the noble truths of the Buddha, that if there's greed and hatred and ignorance, the more there is of it, the more humans will suffer. But it has an opposite. The opposite of greed is generosity. The opposite of hatred is love. The opposite of ignorance is wisdom. And these are qualities that are born in you also, that you have, that is your noble birthright. So when Helen speaks, I too want to weep. It's also not new. If we go back 100 years or 500 or 1,000 years, we'll still see people being mistreated and enslaved and hungry children and so many other things. Holding it all in the great heart of compassion so that we don't turn away. We don't have fear to look. I was sitting with Jerry Brown right at the time when he was ending his term. his last term as governor. And I said, Jerry, what are you going to focus on? What are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go to my ranch in the Sierras, and tend the land. But there are two things I care about. One is climate change, and one is nuclear proliferation. And what I understood, we talked about nuclear proliferation. There are still 14,000 nuclear bombs and warheads scattered around the world. Each one could be enormously destructive. Is if we don't look, if we don't acknowledge it, like Helen is saying, if we don't acknowledge the children who are hungry, if we don't acknowledge not just Ukraine or Gaza, but Sudan and the Congo and Myanmar and the Rohingyas, if we turn our gaze away in denial, we can't make a difference. Our heart has to be big enough and our dignity is strong enough that we can turn and say, yes, we're willing to see the nuclear weapons are still here. And then some of us are called to do that work, to support the treaties and the disarming in ways that we can. Some of us are called to the work of the children. Some of us are called to the environment, to the rainforests. We each have a way to reach out our hand and mend some part of the fabric of life that we're woven into. And it's not your job to do it all. And it's not your job to fix it all or to think that it should go away on your watch, because it won't. Nor to be overwhelmed, but to say, I am here and I stand up with courage and love and compassion, and I will add my part. I will add my voice and my love and my energy to this. And this is what you can do. If you let the grief overwhelm you, you have to hold it with something bigger. This is humanity. This is the struggle of the ages. So you hold it, but you hold it from a bigger place.
There is a perspective from which the forces of life are not just what we see on the outside, but also what happens on the inside, and from which perhaps part of the purpose of life is to bring more love into our lives and into our world. If we hold that perspective, then how we think and how we feel matters, not instead of what we do, but as well as what we do. And what we do can be imbued with that meaning and that purpose. And I think that makes the outer battles a little differently framed, because it's an expression of who we are. But, what happens out here, death, life, birth, creation, destruction, war, peace, it matters. It matters a lot. And yet nothing can take away the joy, the heart, the love that emanates like a fountain from the inside out. Jack, we're nearing the end of our time here today. As we move towards closing, I just want to ask, are there any final words you want to share with us?
I want to get quiet for a moment, because what you just said was also so beautiful and moving. William Blake said, if one is to do good, it must be done in the minute particulars. General good is the plea of the hypocrite, the flatterer, and the scoundrel. So we have all these ideas and things of what should be. But what you said, Ocean, about being it, becoming it in some way, in this way, the inner and the outer are not separate. They're this life that we live. I'm going to read a little short story as a way to end. And it's kind of a very intimate or personal story from a man, because how we live, how we touch the world is governed by this. it's 8:30 in the morning, busy in the clinic, when an elderly gentleman in his 80s arrived to have stitches removed from his hand. He says he's in a hurry. He has an appointment coming up soon at 9. I take his vital signs and sit down knowing it could be a long time till he's seen. He says, please, I've got another appointment. Can you do this? So I say, come with me. And I say, as I'm taking out the stitches, is it another doctor's appointment? And he says, no, he needs to go to the nursing home to eat breakfast with his wife. I inquire as to her health. He told me she'd been there for a while. She was the victim of Alzheimer's disease. And as we talked, I asked if she would be upset if he was late. He replied she no longer knew who he was, that she'd not recognized him for 5 years now. I was surprised and asked him, and you still go every morning, even though she doesn't know who you are? He patted my hand and smiled and said, she doesn't know me, but I still know who she is. How we touch this world, how we see it, how we see everybody. I do a loving kindness practice, and I love to see the child inside everyone. You know, the people I might say are bad actors, and I see them, their original innocence when they were in kindergarten at 5 years old with that shining eyes. And I say, that also is in there. And so to see that allows us somehow to enter the difficulty of the world and say, yes, I will see with the eyes of love anyway, and not forget.
I will see with the eyes of love anyway, and not forget. So beautiful. And folks, I just want to say my closing piece is this. They say put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others when you're on an airplane. I don't think it's quite so linear. I think we take care of ourselves and we take care of others and we witness and we act, and it's all part of life. But some of us have a tendency to give to everyone else first, to think about the world and the world's problems and the world's suffering without caring for ourselves. So nurture the nurturer, love the servant, love yourself, not for what you do, but for who you are. And of course, I wouldn't be representing Food Revolution Network if I didn't also say every bite you take is a chance to practice self-love, self-care, and right relation with the world around you. So bless you all. Thank you so much for being with us in this beautiful, beautiful exchange and sharing. Jack, thank you.
Thank you, Ocean. It's a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. Lots of hearts going up on the screen here. Thank you all so much. Bless you. And for those who are asking, yes, we have recorded and we will send out a link for the replay.
And if they want anything, from me, they can just go to jackkornfield.com, and there's all kinds of free guided meditations and practices and so forth. So.
jackkornfield.com, and of course, lots of books. So many wonderful resources. And
beautiful trainings. If anyone wants to know how to teach this to others, there's beautiful trainings too. So thank you.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you, Jack.